We can have everyone take their seat. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. Thank you. We'd like to get started. First of all, thank you all for coming and welcome to the Simsbury Chamber of Commerce Awards Leadership Luncheon. I'd like to thank Hot Meadow Country Club for hosting us. A great new room just recently renovated, so thank you for having us. I'd like to welcome all of our award recipients for what they're about to receive today and their families for coming. Before I do that, I'd like to give a little recap of what's occurred over the last year in the Simsbury Chamber of Commerce. For those who don't know what's been going on with the Simsbury Chamber, you must be under a rock of some sort, because we have been out there quite a bit in the last year and done a lot of great things. And I started to put together a list in my mind, and I said, oh, I'd better write this down because there are quite a few. This past year, we hosted over 28 networking events and socials, which is quite amazing. We organized 15 new business ribbon cuttings, which is great for our area and our economy. Educationally, we co-hosted a job shadow day with the Master's School that was very successful. We co-sponsored a Lunch and Learn at Henry James Memorial School for over 700 students. And I think there were over 35 mentors that were there. We presented 9 educational programs, including recently our LeaderCast, which was a big success as well. And lastly, very important, our Education Committee has awarded over $3,500 in scholarships to local graduating students this past year, which is phenomenal. On the health and wellness side, we held over 10 events, including the first Community Health Expo, which was held this past year and was very successful. And then, obviously, our ever-popular Simsbury Spooktacular Chili Challenge, which attracted nearly 3,000 people this past fall. We held our largest ever Business Leaders Breakfast, which was at the Dunkin' Donuts Stadium this past year, which was a little different. We had over 260 registrants. And lastly, we launched recently our Simsbury Public Art Trail. So if you haven't seen those statues, please get out and look at that. And as of early reporting, they've been very, very successful, I think. So that was a large undertaking that's taken over a year to put that all together. And those are some of the highlights of some of the things that we've been trying to accomplish for the membership throughout the year, none of which could be done without our staff of 10 people. No, we really have one, but with the list, it should be a staff of 10. And we do. We have Lisa Gray, our executive director. Lisa, if you would stand. Nothing gets done on this list without her. She works tirelessly to get everything done. Get it perfect and sometimes get it done. We don't admit that, though. And then, obviously, her able-bodied assistant, Lori, where are you? Lori Lebutkin? See, she's still working. So I need a big round of applause for Lori as well, who assists Lisa. And from a board perspective, we owe so much to them to do what we do and do it very well, which I think has shown over the last year and a half in some of the projects that we've done, new undertakings, unique things that we've tried to set up and do for our membership. At this time, I'd like to introduce Pastor Matthew Blazer from the Covenant Presbyterian Church, who will give the invocation.
When I joined the chamber 3 years ago, Lori and Lisa both expressed appreciation that there was someone in the chamber who would be willing to do this. And I was surprised. I thought that was just a family thing, that they would expect me to show up and do an invocation or a prayer. But I'm happy to do it. And the reason is not because I believe that we share beliefs. I am in circles that believe pluralism and tolerance are everything, and in circles that believe that they're bad. And For us, it's very helpful to remember that we are united, perhaps not in a priority list, but being for our city. That's part of the reason that we're here, whether it's networking or our business or our town specifically, that is why we're here. And so as I pray, my goal is to respectfully engage those of us with belief, because we are for our town, in the hopes that our networking and as our businesses grow and thrive, our town will get better. So I'm going to bow my head because that's my faith tradition. I would encourage you to do so if you're comfortable with that. If you're not, that's fine. I'm going to say amen at the end, which is an old word that just means right. So if that's in your tradition, I would encourage you to say it. If not, no worries. Please join with me. God, we ask for your help with our conversations, with our networking, with our fiscal responsibilities in the place that you have placed us. We ask that all of those things would work together to make a better town, one where all humans can flourish. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. I'd like to just give a brief recap for those who were not at the annual meeting that we just had earlier. We voted in a new set of directors that for this coming year, Jerry Toner, who has sat as a member of the Board of Directors as a substitute, but now has been voted in for a full 3-year term. New member Chris Barnett of Berkshire Hathaway. Micah Emoji, I'm looking for him. Micah Joma, who is a new director as well. And the last, oh yes, and Tim Push, also a new director. Where's Tim? Here we are, thank you. And on the officer side, Ray Langan was brought in as our secretary, replacing Elaine Groundwater. And then as president, myself, Lou George. Vice presidents are Dan Correa and Nancy Sheets. And treasurer, Linda Canarum, who is, how many more years do you have? 14? So those are the new directors and officers of the organization for the upcoming year. At this time, I would like to present 3 awards. The first to Elaine Groundwater, who has served on the board for 5 years. She was our secretary, and she provided great insight and was always willing to help out and volunteer. So Elaine, if you would come up here. Thank you. Thank you for all your service. Thank you. Next, directors who are leaving the board. One, Joe Scheinman, who's from Robert Hensley and Associates, has served on the board for a little over 3 years, has been a great help. We hate to see him go, love to see him stay, but has a lot going on, as we all do. And he, right up till the end, has provided great ideas and was inspirational in getting us down to the Yard Goat Stadium for our Business Leaders Breakfast. So, Joe, come on up. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good time.
Is Pradeep here? And then lastly, director leaving, Pradeep Bajaj, who I don't believe is here. He's served on the board for 3 years and is leaving, and we hate to see him go as well. And we have a parting gift for him, but we will give it to him another time. So for Pradeep as well, thank you. So I just want to thank all of the new people coming on as board members for what you're going to embark upon. And for those leaving, again, thank you. And at this time, I'd like to call Lisa Gray up.
Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great pleasure today to present the award to our Public Servant of the Year. Pastor Woody Edens has been a part of the Simsbury community for the past 10 years. since he came to assume the role of lead minister at Simsbury United Methodist Church. Pastor Woody has been deeply involved in the civic fabric of this community, serving on the Community for Care, including as its co-chair. He also serves as the chairman of the Board of Commissioners for the Simsbury Housing Authority. In this role, he is serving one of Simsbury's most vulnerable communities and is always looking for opportunities to serve them better with the limited resources available. Pastor Woody has led our town in prayer and responded to calls for help whenever asked, and even when not asked. He works with the other clerical leaders in town to share information and resources, all for the benefit of the Simsbury community. He also takes his service to Africa to lead missions to help communities in need. Pastor Woody has volunteered to share his experiences growing up in Alabama during the civil rights movement with community groups so that we can benefit from a perspective that is different from our own. Such is Woody's kind and generous spirit. He treats everyone with dignity and respect and is always looking out for the impact on families and those he serves in the community. It is this community service we are honoring with this award. Pastor Woody, would you come up, please? We are also very honored every year to be able to award the Educator of the Year. Mary Ann Lindquist's career started 40 years ago when she was hired to teach 6th grade at Squadron Line School. After 1 year in that role, Mary Ann found her permanent home as a 1st grade teacher at Latimer Lane School. For the next 39 years, Mary Ann played a major role in shaping the growth of primary-age learners on the south side of town. Her direct instruction impacted more than 800 students in her career, but her willingness to mentor and collaborate with other educators over her career saw her influence reach well into the thousands. Even in her 40th and final year with the Simsbury Public Schools, Mary Ann is a leader in her professional learning communities, often bringing articles and books to the attention of her teammates and principal. She eagerly accepted every new training and growth opportunity that came her way. She truly is the shining example of a lifelong learner. And now, as she prepares to enjoy her retirement, she has already planned the first 3 months she'll be serving as a long-term substitute in 2nd grade at Latimer Lane School. Mary Ann Lindquist, please come on up here.
We'd like to get moving with the rest of the program so that we can get everybody out of here and enjoying the wonderful day. At this time, I'd like to call up Melissa Vasquez to present our Business Leader of the Year Award.
It's a joy to introduce today's honoree, a man who is my boss and the man I call Dad. Dennis is without a doubt the hardest working man I've ever known. It's been 15 years since I began working at D.E. Jacobs Associates. As time went on, I started to see him as more than just my father. I got to witness him as the versatile businessman that he is, wearing multiple hats each and every day. He had to be a salesman, an architect, and a carpenter, all in one day. I learned from his example that a tireless work ethic is the most important part of being successful in business. Watching him work has always amazed me. No matter how many things go wrong, how many times the phone rings, how many customers walk in with endless questions, or truck drivers calling to say that they're running late, Dennis always manages to handle every task with patience and grace. He finds a solution no matter what. Dennis's ability to keep his eye on the big picture despite a fog of immediate concerns is one of the main reasons he's been so admired and successful. Being your own boss has its rewards, and it also comes with huge responsibilities. I've seen how my father has carried the weight of that responsibility for our family, for his employees, and for each of our clients. He has taught me that this business is about relationships we build with the people and the community. The first impression that we leave with each person is one that will last forever. Okay. To Dennis, my dad. No crying. I have grown to love our business over the past 15 years. I'm honored you've allowed me to be a part of the beautiful projects we bring to life in our customers' homes. I'm grateful to be here today and honor you not only as an amazing businessman, but also as the kind and compassionate man that you are. Thank you for believing in your dreams and never giving up on them, no matter the obstacles. Thank you for giving so much of yourself to this community through your work, through your service, and as both a mentor and a friend. And I just want to take a minute to just list a few of Dennis's accomplishments. He's been a chamber member for 27 years. He's been on the committee for the September Fest, Education and Home Show, mentor for Job Shadow Day with Simsbury High School for 12 years, participates in Luncheon Learn at Henry James Middle School, Chamber Board of Directors since 2001, Director, Vice President, and President from 2009 to 2011, Director Emeritus in 2014, sits on the Chamber Chili Challenge Committee, sits on the Performing Arts Center Operations Committee, and he started doing that to support Ferg, who got him involved in the chamber 27 years ago. And he's tips trained, September Fest Transition Committee, Simsbury United Methodist Church. He's been a faithful participant in local outreach programs, including the youth mission trips, especially Appalachia Service Projects, which he's done with my daughter a few times. Farmington Valley. He was raised in the Farmington Valley and graduated from Farmington High School in 1975. College graduate in construction engineering and management and design. He moved to Simsbury with his wife Nancy in 1984, started D. Jacobs Associates Kitchen and Bath Design Build Company in 1991, designed and built over 350 kitchens, baths, additions, and projects since then. Many people even in this room today. Okay, and lastly, on a personal note, thank you for always being by my side. Everything I've gone through, I can't imagine anyone else more deserving of this award than you. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. Bob Patricelli has spent over 50 years in leadership roles in the healthcare industry, the federal government, and civic engagement. He is currently co-chair of the Connecticut's Commission on Fiscal Stability and Economic Growth, appointed by Governor Malloy in December of 2017. He began his business career in 1987 as an entrepreneur with the founding of Value Health Incorporated, which he and his team grew from a startup to a Fortune 1000 company within 10 years. In 2000, Bob founded and led Evolution Benefits, a health benefit debit card company, until it was sold in 2010. He also founded and led Women's Health USA, which serves patients and physicians in the fields of women's health, selling that company in late 2017. Bob has had a long career in the federal government, initially as a White House fellow, then as a minority counsel to U.S. Senate subcommittee, then as a deputy undersecretary for policy at the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and finally as an administrator of the Urban Mass Transportation Administration. His federal career spanned the Johnson, Nixon, and Ford administrations. He continues lifelong love of public policy as a member of the Institute of Medicine in the Executive Council of the Division of Health Policy and Management at the Harvard School of Public Health. Bob has served a wide variety of business and nonprofit boards, including Newman's Own Foundation, Ocean Exploration Trust, Bushnell Memorial Hall, Patricelli Center for Social Entrepreneurship at Wesleyan University, Shining Hope for Communities in Nairobi, Kenya, and the Metro Hartford Alliance. He grew up in Hartford, attended Wesleyan University and Harvard Law School, and was a Fulbright Scholar at the University of Paris. He and his wife, Margaret, live here in Simsbury on a horse farm. And with that, I'd like you all to join me in welcoming Bob Petrocelli.
Well, first I have to apologize for that embarrassingly long resume that Lisa must have dug up somewhere. Everything but my A1C and my pulse. Well, it's such a special pleasure to be here today. Family and I have lived in Simsbury since 1971, and this is the place where my daughter had her post-marriage reception. My kids grew up at that pool, raising hell, and it's great to be here. It's great to be with you. Also want to thank many of you for coming up and for the whole community for expressing your consolations and expressions of support after the terrible horse fire at Folly Farm where we lived this last December. But that is behind us and we're rebuilding. My objective today is to make you mad. And I'm not kidding. And that's a shame because it's a beautiful day. But early in that career you heard about, I had the wonderful honor to work with somebody named John Gardner, who was Secretary of HEW for Lyndon Johnson, and he headed a major foundation. He went on to found Common Cause and the independent sector, and he wrote short books about America, always under 100 pages. And he analyzed the American system, and he would boil it down. And about American democracy, he said, freedom and responsibility, liberty and duty, that's the deal. You want freedom, you got to take responsibility. You want liberty, you've got a duty. That's the deal. And that's what we've forgotten in Connecticut over the last few decades and in the country as a whole. Because we've dug a huge hole with our government. And frankly, we have nobody to blame but ourselves. Because we stopped paying attention. And we delegated it to the political community. And that's the truth. When I was approaching retirement after selling my last company last year, I got some friends, largely in the business community, together, and we knew that the state was in difficulty, and we said, so what are we doing about it? We live here, it's our state. If the ship sinks, we're on it. And we went to the governor and the legislative leaders and said, appoint a group of private citizens to saddle up and take a look at the problems facing Connecticut and what might be done. And this is one of the great attributes of a small state like Connecticut. You can get the people and make things happen. And they did. And the 6 so-called caucus leaders, Republicans and Democrats, in the space of 45 minutes, agreed that they needed help. And so 14 of us were appointed last December and given 76 days to write a comprehensive report, which was due March 1, on the problems associated with fiscal stability and economic growth in the state of Connecticut, those 2 things. So we were the commission on fiscal stability and economic growth. And we were optimistic. We had a sense that the legislative leaders knew they needed help. One of the staffers up there started calling us the Jesus Take the Wheel Commission, which of course was beyond our capabilities. But so we presented our report after 76 days. It was 119 pages. It was, I think, who am I to say, very well done and thoughtful and rigorous. And I want to tell you about it, but not as a piece of history, but because it hasn't been enacted yet and the state's problems haven't been fixed. You've got a slide deck in front of you that I'll try to remember to scroll through, but mainly what I want to tell you today is what the problems are. Our solutions, I think, our proposed solutions were good ones, but there could be variations. The important thing is to mobilize this state to face up to its fundamental problems and to elect people who will make changes. And there's no better time for that than right at the beginning of a political campaign. Let's see, Lisa, am I just going to press page up or something? You can, okay. That was our charge, fiscal stability and economic growth, big enough charge. And we started with an analysis, as all of you would when you're looking at a business problem. So what's the situation? And we ended up calling this the burning platform. Connecticut is a burning platform, and we are standing on it. And we've got tons of data here, but I'd like to boil it down as much as I can, and I want you to remember 6 facts in your forthcoming crusade. And I'll touch on those as I go through this. This is the first one. Connecticut's gross state product, the total economic activity of this state, has actually declined by 9.1% in the last 10 years. Every other state in New England and in the nation as a whole, on average, has had positive economic growth. We're down 9.2%. That's close to $25 billion of economic activity below the zero line that we've just lost in this state. And with it, the state lost revenues, and you all lost customers and all the rest. That is a terrible outlier to find yourself in. And of course, most of us, me certainly included, had no idea that we were facing that kind of competitive picture of relative failure. Fact number 2, we have lost our competitive positioning as a state over the last 15 years. Across the top of this chart are some often quoted, largely business surveys of the 50 states compared on a bunch of different indicia. And these are all highly validated studies, Moody's, Forbes, ALEC, which is the legislative groups around the country. And then the last one, Beacon Hill, is important because they maintain the best of the state competitiveness analyses. And you see in the call-out box on the bottom right, fact number 2, we have gone from 8th best, 1 being good, 8th best competitive position in 2001 to 43rd now. In what, 16 years? We're tied, as you can see here, more or less with the great state of New Jersey, for being in the tank. You can't be proud of it. And with that loss of competitiveness, our growth has slowed. Not surprising. You would expect that, right? They go hand in hand. So I told you that we'd lost 9.1% over the last 10 years. This charts the drop in competitiveness against the slowdown in growth in this state. There are a lot of particular indicia of what's going on. Out-migration is a big problem for us. And it's not just that we're losing 10 to 20,000 people a year on a net basis. The people we're losing earn $30,000 more a year than the people we're getting. So it's compounded. It's worse than the net out-migration loss. It's a shift to lower income earners. Now let's move to the state's own finances. So fact one, we've lost 9.1%. Fact two, we've gone from 8th to 43rd in 15 years. Fact three, our budget is a train wreck. You know, we have the general fund and we have the special transportation fund. I'm focusing on the general fund. That's the main game, about $20 billion in spending. Because of the windfall in tax receipts in the last few months, the legislature was able to squeak by with a balanced budget for the current fiscal year, fiscal 18, and they will be able, with those funds, to balance 19 as well. This chart does not reflect the actions taken in the last 2 or 3 weeks when they voted out amendments to the biennial budget. But the out years, fiscal 20 through 22, are deeply in the red or the blue. They're a little better, but not much, as a result of those new tax receipts. But even on a corrected basis, using the latest data, it's a $2 billion deficit in fiscal 20. It goes to $2.6 billion in 21 and $3.1 billion in 22. And there is no way in sight that the state is going to be able to fund those deficits. This is right around the corner. So fact number three, we've got $2 to $3 billion a year deficits coming, growing at $500 million a year. This is a little unbundling of the state general fund budget. But I think the headlines are up there in that bolded row. The fixed expenditures. Fixed expenditures are state pension, post-retirement, healthcare obligations, debt service, Medicaid, and formula-driven social services, not discretionary. We will be up to 53% of the general fund budget being fixed by next year. Hard to change, fixed. I don't have the data on this, but I don't think any other state is close to that. And the fixed expenditures are growing at 5.9, let's call it 6% a year. Now, the Malloy administration has done a pretty good job on the things it could control, discretionary expenditures. They've actually cut 8,000 heads out of the state workforce in the last 7 years, and they've held discretionary expenditures more or less flat. But the budget is being eaten up with these fixed expenditures. And cutting across the fixed and the discretionary are state employee and teacher pension costs and state employee compensation. Let me just say a word about that. We were talking at our table about state employee compensation, and the belief used to be, well, they deserve good benefits because they weren't paid, base pay equivalent to the private sector. According to the American Enterprise Institute study in 2014, which is the best comparative study we've still got, Connecticut state employees' base compensation is 2% above comparable private sector compensation. And when you include fringes, it's 42% above private sector compensation. 42% all in compared to private sector compensation. We have the distinction of having the highest variation above private sector compensation of any state in the country. I didn't even make that a fact, but fact number 3 is 53% fixed expenditures growing at 6% a year. Fact number 5. So the state's got a balance sheet. You're a businessman, you understand balance sheets along with P&Ls. By and large, our legislature only worries about its P&L, i.e. its budget, and they celebrate when they can balance the budget. But they often celebrate balancing the budget on the back of a deteriorating balance sheet. And we now have, as you see on the left side of this chart, $86 billion in general obligation and non-GO debt and unfunded pension and health care liabilities. Unfunded pension and post-retirement health care. Now, the state pays for state employee pensions and post-retirement health care and teacher pensions, but not teacher post-retirement health care. So that's all in here, those pieces. But that's not the end of the bad news, because that $85 billion is calculated using overly optimistic investment return assumptions, which all around the country pension managers like to use. For example, they're using an 8% discount rate on the teacher pension plan. Do you believe that? And a 6.9% on state employee. If you used a 6% discount rate or investment return assumption on those two plans, the unfunded liabilities would be $100 billion. Now, let's put that in perspective. We have about 1 million homeowners in the state. $100 billion in debt and unfunded liabilities is the equivalent of having a $100,000 mortgage on the home of every homeowner in the state. And it really is, isn't it? Because the taxpayers are responsible for that debt. I mean, who knew, right? $100 billion. And you go down the dot points on the right there, where we're the worst or we're the third from the worst. Pick your poison there. The reference to pension contributions at debt being 26% of the general fund revenue, being the highest in the country. I mean, a normal state's 10 to 15%. We're up to 26%, and oh gosh, it gets worse. Because if we really calculated it correctly, again with proper investment return assumptions, we'd really be needing 35% of total general fund revenues to pay our debt and unfunded liabilities. I mean, that's like dragging a 1,000-pound weight around as a state budget officer behind you. And we have the distinction, you can see, at least we're third behind Illinois and New Jersey on that score, but not good, that if you used, including the brown part of those bars, the proper investment return assumptions, you see we'd be up to 35%. So let me summarize for you the 6 points that you must remember, and I'd like you to practice at home tonight. 9.1% gross state product drop in 10 years. Second, we've gone from 8th to 43rd in our competitiveness rankings. We've lost our mojo, attracting companies and residents. Third, we've got projected general fund deficits of $2 to $3 billion, growing at $500 million a year. Fourth, we've got fixed expenses of 53%, growing at 6% a year. Fifth, we've got $100 billion properly calculated in unfunded liabilities. And sixth, the way it's going, our budget is going to require 35% payments just to fund dues to the past, debt and unfunded liabilities. Well, that's not the end of the bad news, and I'm not purposely not going into the good news, because there's lots of great stuff about Connecticut. I'm a lifelong resident. I wouldn't move out of here even if the situation were worse, but unfortunately many people don't have that affiliation. But there are lots of good things about the state. Education levels, trained workforce, you know that. But going beyond the economic competitiveness and the fiscal situation, we looked at a number of other issues that you need to be aware of. Take transportation. Poor transportation infrastructure is throttling economic growth. This is one stat. The key Bridgeport to Stanford area, which is historically, we've gotten all kinds of new job formation by companies moving out of New York City and into Fairfield County. Traffic delay is up 400%, granted, in the last close to 40 years. And I don't know how many of you drive I-95 in the rush hour, but it is not pretty. And train transportation in New York City out of New Haven is slower than it was 30 years ago. So our transportation infrastructure is ranked in the bottom decile among the 50 states, and it's clearly inhibiting economic growth and renewal. And then just a word about our cities. Any economic location consultant will tell you vital central cities are key to attracting millennials, which is key to attracting new business, and we don't have vital central cities. This is one simple stat on cost of living compared to other cities around the country, but suffice it to say that part of the prescription for renewal has to be to reinvigorate the major cities in the state to attract new jobs. Other things we looked very hard at, and I'm not going to bore you with further, the collective bargaining rules and binding arbitration rules in Connecticut, the workforce misallocations. We have now, in many sectors, lots of good jobs awaiting trained people, and we haven't matched up the training with the workforce needs of the future. We are not stimulating regionalization of services across our 169 towns. The commission felt we weren't going to change from 169 towns. That was tilting at too big a windmill. But we wanted to see more regionalization of services to try to get some of the unnecessary expense out of it. And so that has to be part of the recipe. But then if you step back and you say, what's behind all this? Part of it is the legislature's a train wreck. Yes, we're responsible, all of us, because we weren't watching. But our legislature is a part-time, poorly paid group of people. They're kind of a 19th century legislature trying to deal with 21st century problems. They make $28,000 a year. And in a short session like this, they work 3 months a year. And in a long session, they work 5 to 6. They disbanded their oversight functions a few years ago. So they don't have any capability for oversight anymore. There are probably too many of them, 187 in a small state. New York, Massachusetts, they have full-time legislatures with much richer staffing. People don't want to spend money, but don't we have to look in the engine room and see if we got the right people driving the ship? So government capacity has got to be part of the issue. Well, I'm not going to take you through our recommendations in any detail. You can read the slide deck. They weren't in any case adopted yet, but they were bold. The first one, in some sense, was the boldest. We said we had to completely rebalance the state's tax system away from the income tax and more toward consumption taxes. We would raise sales taxes. We would eliminate a lot of the exemptions in the sales tax. We'd cut the income tax by 18 to 30% across all brackets. We'd do away with the estate tax. We even proposed some small increase in the business tax. That was a downer with chambers around the state. But I will tell you, factually, business is taxed relatively lightly in Connecticut compared to other states. And the income tax cut is, of course, a material business tax reduction for pass-through companies. In fact, I'm curious, how many people in this room are associated with pass-through companies, LLCs, PCs, S-corps? How many with C corporations? Not that many, yeah. So cutting the income tax is good for a lot of reasons. We actually proposed raising the minimum wage. We have an income inequality problem in this state that is serious. We're in the bottom decile of that in the country. We were probably a little too aggressive in trying to go all the way to $15 over the next 5 years. Maybe it ought to be 13, maybe it ought to be 12. But for balance and to help people at the bottom of the economic ladder, we thought some increase in the minimum wage would be appropriate. We're at $10.10, Massachusetts at 11, New York is going to 15. That created a firestorm in the business community. But we were all about balance. We told the legislature they had to clean up their act on how they manage budgets, and they had to create a joint budget committee. Right now, you don't know this, but what happens is we've got a finance committee. They're responsible for revenues. We've got an appropriations committee. They're responsible for spending. They don't meet together. They don't have any common guidelines. At the end of the session, they throw their numbers across literally, throw their numbers across the transom at each other. They don't meet. And then the leaders have to scurry around and find some consensus. There's no guiding budgetary numbers. We said you got to take $1 billion out of the state spend. And in 76 days, we couldn't come up with all the ways, but we found a number of reports done in other states by major consulting houses, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, where this kind of top-to-bottom examination of expense has been done to good effect. We gotta do something about the collective bargaining situation. We are one of only 4 states that allows pensions and retirement health care to be set by collective bargaining. 46 states do it by the legislature. You wonder, there's a fundamental reason about how we got into the problem we're in. So it's done out of sight between the governor's office and collective bargaining units. Legislature gets to vote up or down only, with typically a week or two left in the session, so it has no effective voice in the process. We got to change that. We got to change the teachers' retirement system. That's a absolute exploding bombshell of steeply rising pension costs that are coming. And we propose to actually contribute the proceeds of the state lottery to the teachers' pension to permit a pay down of $7 billion of their unfunded liabilities. We said we got to fix our transportation system. Yeah, we got to raise taxes. By the way, in our scheme, the tax increase associated with the gas tax increase was far more than outbalanced by the income tax cuts. So it was all net positive for people. But boy, that one fell on deaf ears at the legislature, especially with the Republicans, because anything that smacks of a tax increase in an election year, forget. And they didn't want to do tolls either. But when it comes to economic development, if you don't have a functioning transportation system, you are not going to get businesses into the state of Connecticut, or they're not going to stay. GE executives said when they were contemplating their move to Boston, how can we have a headquarters of a global company when we don't know if it's going to take us 1 hour or 3 hours to get to JFK to get a flight? You know, hello. We've got to do some things to rebuild our cities. We had dozens of pages on economic development and training initiatives, and we had some stimulus for the regionalization of services at the municipal level. Well, I had a couple of more slides, but let me tell you what happened. We presented, that's okay, Lisa. Sure, thanks. We were widely acclaimed by editorial boards around the state. The commission's report, I think, was well received, and the governor liked it, praised it. And the legislature did take it seriously. We had an unprecedented hearing in the hall of the House, which was the only room big enough, with about 100 legislators interrogating Jim Smith and me as the co-chairs for 5 hours. So we got airtime. But it was just too much for them in a short session and in an election year. They did authorize some studies of our proposals. Here's what some of the editorial boards said about the legislature's performance. The Hartford Courant on May 10th. The legislature congratulated itself Wednesday for its on-time budget, but lawmakers have only put off decisions on the state's economic future. The General Assembly has all but ignored a comprehensive look at how to fix Connecticut's economy while spending an inordinate amount of time the last few years arguing about casinos and tolls. The Hearst newspapers, you know, the largest newspaper syndicate in the state, refers to the continuing slide toward economic disadvantage that was the raison d'etre for the legislators creating the 14-member ad hoc commission on fiscal stability. The group's report unveiled in March was an unflinching, nonpartisan presentation of where Connecticut stands, both in absolute and in comparison terms. Here's what the smiling legislators have to think about over the summer and be committed to handling when they come back in the fall. An assessment from the commission. Connecticut's ability to deal with essentials like education, transportation, caring for the vulnerable is being suffocated by the gorillas of rising debt and unfunded liabilities. The New London Day, the election year spending and revenue plan passed by the General Assembly Wednesday was on time, over budget, and reform avoidant. The commission calls its report Connecticut's burning platform. State senators and representatives soon move into the campaign phase of the political cycle, and parties will be choosing their candidates for governor. If elected, what is each of them individually committed to do to take their fiscal responsibilities beyond the next budget and on to long-term strategy? When you see them, ask. Now, this commission wasn't a one-hit wonder. All of us who signed up for this were skeptical that we were going to get major forward progress in a short session. But here's the discussion for all of us. How do we now create a citizen movement that makes it impossible for the next governor and the next legislature to continue to ignore these problems? How do we do that? How do we get you and everybody so mad that it's like the guy from the old movie, I'm mad as hell and I won't take it anymore? Because it's our government. It's our state. Freedom and responsibility. You can't delegate this stuff. You got to know the facts and hold people's feet to the fire. And if everybody in this room and 100 rooms like it doesn't have a sense of urgency and responsibility, we'll keep kicking the can down the road, but at some point, you know, people are going to sit down and there aren't going to be enough chairs. So that's a question I leave you with. Jim Smith and I and the other members of the commission, we've been disbanded, but we're still working as private citizens. And I'd like to get your input, your questions, and any of your thoughts about how we can create collectively a citizen movement that will get some action out of a risk-averse set of political leaders. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Well, how about those Simsbury Art Trail statues? But Bob, thank you, and I think it is a reality that we all need to hear probably more than once. So again, thank you to Bob Patricelli for coming out. At this time, I'd like to call up Elaine Groundwater, the chairman of our Education Committee, to present the scholarships.
On a brighter note, I'd like to thank the Education Committee for all their hard work this year, and I'd like to thank all the members and everyone that have contributed to the fundraising for the scholarship awards. And we have some deserving recipients here, and I'd like to say their names and have them come up to present their scholarship award. Nathaniel Bargman, he's not here, Simsbury High School. Michael Bazzano, Simsbury High School. James Carew, the Master's School, he's not present. Grace Cloyd, Suffield High School. Margot Everstike, Simsbury High School. And David Naples, Simsbury High School.
Thank you. A couple. Thank you. Thank you.
So everyone, thank you very much for coming out. Congratulations to all those who received awards and scholarships. I'd like to thank our sponsors to help put this on. Alliances by Elisa, Media Relations, Hassett and George, People's United Bank, Phase Zero Design, Robert Hensley and Associates, Sage Financial Design, and Simsbury Bank. Thank you to all the sponsors for helping put this on. And again, thank you. We have concluded. Enjoy each other's company as long as you'd like here. We are done, but the day is beautiful out there, so enjoy. Thank you very much for coming out.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.